In 2009, the world made a promise. Developed countries agreed to mobilize $100 billion each year for climate action. But year after year, that promise has fallen short. Now, at COP29, there's a new hope. The new Collective Quantified Goal, or NCQG. Can it finally bridge the gap? Here's everything you need to know about NCQG and why it could be the world's biggest climate finance movement yet. The new Collective Quantified Goal is the next big target for global climate finance. It's designed to support the most vulnerable nations in the face of changing climate, providing resources for them to adapt, mitigate, and build resilience. Unlike the $100 billion goal set in 2009, NCQG is not just about maintaining the status quo. It's a larger, more dynamic commitment that scales with the increasing needs of developing countries as climate impacts grow. Back in 2009, at COP15, the $100 billion promise was set. But over the years, as climate impacts intensified, the goal was never fully met. Then, at COP21 in Paris, countries agreed that a new target would be set, one starting from a floor of $100 billion but based on the true growing needs of vulnerable communities. This new goal has been years in the making. Starting at COP25 in 2019 and finally coming to a vote at COP29. The stakes? Higher than ever. This target will define the future of climate finance and determine the support available for those facing the worst impacts of climate change. Climate disasters are hitting harder and more frequently. Just in the past year, we have seen how devastating these impacts can be. India, as one of the world's fastest growing economies and a country highly vulnerable to climate impacts, plays a critical role in the NCQG dialogue. From intense monsoon floods to deadly heat waves, India's communities and infrastructure are already experiencing the pressures of climate change. For India, NCQG is more than just a climate finance target. It's essential to ensuring climate justice and an equitable transition. India has committed to reaching net zero by 2070. But achieving this ambition will require unprecedented funding for renewable energy, climate resilient agriculture, and sustainable urban infrastructure. India has repeatedly called for climate equity, stressing that developed countries with their historical emissions have a responsibility to support developing countries like itself. The funds promised under NCQG would help India scale its renewable energy projects, meet its climate targets, and protect its most vulnerable communities. NCQG isn't just about money. It's about fairness. The principle of common but differentiated responsibilities recognizes that developed countries who have contributed the most emissions should provide the most finance to help vulnerable nations. In India's case, this principle means that developed nations must assist in financing the technology transfer and adaptation resources India needs. If NCQG succeeds, India and other emerging economies could pursue sustainable growth without compromising their development goals. NCQG aims to change that, setting an ambitious new target that's essential for funding a sustainable future. A better climate finance target would break down into three areas: mitigation to prevent impacts, adaptation to build resilience, and loss and damage to help recovery. Most of the funds for adaptation and loss and damage should come in the form of grants, not loans, to prevent debt burden on countries already struggling. Right now, low income nations spend 5 times more on debt than on climate adaptation. This imbalance needs to change. One of the biggest barriers to climate finance is accessibility. Right now, it takes an average of over 1100 days to access resources from the Green Climate Fund, time that vulnerable communities don't have. The NCQG should prioritize faster, more direct access to funds for the most fragile nations. A portion could be ring fenced specifically for least developed countries, ensuring no one is left behind. Climate impacts often hit women and girls the hardest, yet only 50% of adaptation funding includes gender consideration. The NCQG must include specific targets to promote gender equality, creating a just transition that leaves no one out. Leading up to COP29, negotiations are heating up. The Zurich Climate Resilience Alliance and others are pushing world leaders to set a bold, ambitious NCQG. This is the world's best chance to fund a sustainable, equitable future. For every life on the line, every community facing the front lines of climate change, from India's coastal regions to the islands of the Pacific, we can't let COP29 pass without setting a transformative NCQG. Follow us for updates on NCQG and COP29. Join the conversation and demand action. Our future depends on it.